And welcome everybody to another edition of Meet the Candidates and Meet Your Elected Leaders. I am thrilled today to welcome Congressman Frank Mrvan. He was just elected to represent Indiana's 1st District, and what a great honor to have him in partnership with Serbian Radio Chicago and Serbian-American Voters Alliance to get to know him better and have him get to know our community a little better, because Serbian Americans have been a part of that vibrant District 1 community of Northwest Indiana. Congressman Mrvan, what a great pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you so very much for the opportunity, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and our community in the Serbian American community throughout Northwest Indiana and Chicagoland, especially here. I also want to wish all listeners practicing an early happy Easter for this Sunday.
And thank you so much. What a wonderful opportunity to have you on this Good Friday and beginning of our Easter holiday. So I wanted to unpack a few things with you, especially that are of concern to the Serbian American constituents. As I said, you were just elected to that wonderful Northwest Indiana District 1. We had a very close relationship with your predecessor, Pete Wisklowski. He sat on the Serbian American Congressional Caucus, and we would like to know a little bit more about you, how you decided to enter political arena, and what your thoughts are on furthering the relationship between yourself and the Serbian American community.
Well, a little bit about myself to start off. My name's Frank Mrvan. I married my high school sweetheart, Jane. We will be married 25 years this September. We have 2 daughters, Genevieve, who is 18. She's a senior in high school. And I have a daughter, Scarlett, who's 14, who's an 8th grader. So they're a big part of my life. And how I chose to be a candidate for Congress is through my lifetime experiences. First and foremost, my father has been a state senator in the state of Indiana for approximately 4 decades. I have always been at his side. I've ran his campaigns. I was his legislative aide, worked very closely with him. And at the kitchen table, we talked about government and reaching across the aisle and figuring out ways to find solutions. That being said, I was an elected official for 15 years. That I was a township trustee. And what that position is very the responsibility is emergency disaster relief or emergency poor relief. I represented 180,000 people. We expanded the scope of that to get at the core root of poverty and to hold people accountable. Not only did we do direct assistance, but we also worked with faith-based communities, social services, and mental health and addiction services to get at the core root and to be able to help people who needed assistance to become self-supporting, self-sufficient, and to be able to find jobs and opportunities that would support families. With that, we also ran a transportation system. We ran Wicker Park in Northwest Indiana. We did a great deal of work with the veterans. So when Congressman Wisklowski had retired, I was in a position to where I felt strongly based on bringing people together and advocating for a cause. And what we had accomplished over those 15 years put us in a competitive race. And as we campaigned, we talked about making sure that we brought people in, that we were inclusive, and that we would advocate for causes and work with like-minded individuals, no matter what party you were with, to find solutions and challenges to what we faced. And my why is because I want to make Northwest Indiana a better place. I also want to make sure we have a good quality of air and water. I want to protect the steel industry and make sure that the steel industry continues to provide good paying jobs and can compete in a global market. And, we also want to make sure that we create opportunities for men and women to thrive, to invest in themselves, and more importantly, to have good paying, self-sustaining jobs with good healthcare coverage, and also a pension and a retirement at the end of that work period. And so we're working every single day towards those goals. And you had mentioned that Congressman Visklowski was a member of the Serbian caucus. I also am a member, a proud member of the Serbian caucus. We joined that early on. And one of the first meetings that we had with a foreign entity was with the Serbian ambassador, Marko Juric. And I hope to be able to host him. We had the conversation in Northwest Indiana, and to have the community, the Serbian community, come together. But that was one of the first meetings that we had. And he was just newly appointed. So I was just newly a member of Congress. We shared a lot in common. And I just appreciate this opportunity to be able to speak to the Serbian community and to connect to it and to find out what the issues are and how we could, as I mentioned, come together and find solutions to any challenges that we have.
Sure, and so do we very much appreciate your interest and being such a important part now of the Serbian-American community. And that was a question that I had for you, being a member now of the Serbian-American caucus and having had that meeting with newly appointed Ambassador Marko Juric. If you can delve into that a little bit more, what are your expectations and where do you see that we can continue that build of a relationship? You realize that during the 1990s, Serbs had a little bit of a difficult relationship. And I think by now we have bridged that gap. And especially the Serbian-American community was very vital in doing that and building these bridges. And we were very happy to hear that you had that initial meeting. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about what that conversation was about.
Well, the conversation absolutely was talking about building relationships. And it was making sure that we understood, or I understood as a member of Congress, the issues that Serbia has. We talked about the economy and, producers of steel, producers of technology, producers of manufacturing goods, and what they were looking to do in the near future. They also talked about the EU and what the plans were, and basically laying the groundwork for a relationship going forward. Those things are extremely important, and the strength of the economy. I believe the ambassador worked on the economy prior to becoming the ambassador, and he was very proud of that fact of working for labor and men and women to make sure that they had a role and that there was a self-sufficiency also going on in their country. And so going forward, the greatest communication that we had was just making sure we have an open line of communications and that we can continue talking. It was all about introductions, but more importantly, we agreed to make sure that he would come visit Northwest Indiana when he has an opportunity and when COVID-19 becomes safe for us. And obviously, he also invited me to go to Serbia. I'm quite busy, but maybe one day we'll be able to put that together on a list and just learn firsthand the economy, the people, the culture, things that are important. But overall, it was a relationship building conversation that will lead to bigger and better things.
Excellent. And the Serbian-American community certainly would like to be a part of that relationship. And that line of communication is open for you, especially through our radio station. We are really pleased that we can now enter this new era and build these new strong relationships. Now, I also wanted to ask you, and you did mention something, having been around your father, who was also a public servant, and being a part of something that was very important to you, which is Veterans Affairs. And when you were elected, you wrote a letter to Speaker of the House in terms of what committees you wanted to serve on. And I understand that your first priority was the Appropriations Committee, but you do now serve on Education and Labor Committee and the Veterans Affairs Committee. Very important things. Tell me a little bit also about why appropriations was so important for you, and if there's an opportunity for you to either sit on that committee. Of course, we would love if you would sit on the Foreign Relations Committee. That is also the one that we like to have our members of Congress on. But tell me about your committees, the assignments, and what you hope for in the future.
Well, one of the reasons Congressman Visklowski was so very successful as a member of Congress and for Northwest Indiana and the state of Indiana and the nation and the world in some instances was his position on appropriations. you're able to leverage not only to prioritize where the dollars go and what's appropriated, but you're also able to leverage your input in legislation going forward. And that being said, no freshman member of Congress has ever been on appropriations. But what we really tried to do is put ourselves in the position for the future, that we're building, working towards that goal. So that being said, we are placed on education and labor, which is a key component to my district in Northwest Indiana. As I mentioned, my experience in poverty and eradicating poverty has a lot to do with education and has a lot to do with labor. Making sure that we have workforce development, making sure we're working with dislocated workers, that they're re-skilled and have the ability to get back into the workforce, and moving in the direction of making sure that our manufacturing base and our workers are lifted up and given an opportunity to participate in our economy for self-sufficiency. And on veteran affairs, that is something that, as my previous experience as elected official, we worked with a lot of the veteran service organizations about veteran homelessness. We did over 4 veteran homeless builds with Habitat for Humanity for homeless veterans. We worked on the PTSD programs to make sure that veterans had access to mental health and identifying that, and put peer-to-peer groups together to help support them. We did a great deal with veteran homelessness, working with the faith-based communities during the winter. On the weekends, we called them homelessness boot camps, where we allowed individuals who were facing eviction or homelessness an opportunity to stay at a place. And we worked with every faith-based community throughout Northwest Indiana to provide that opportunity. And as a member of the Veterans Affairs, we work to make sure that the veterans are assured that they have quality health care through the VA. And I'm also a chairman of a subcommittee, which is technology modernization. And what we're specifically working on, and what my purpose is to close the digital divide through rural and urban areas, and to make sure that through that digital divide, when people have access to broadband, that veterans have access to telehealth and telemental health. We just had testimony today that people who live in rural areas, they can't drive 2 to 3 hours to get to a VA clinic. And so it's our task to make sure that they have access to that. And when we talk about quality healthcare, we're working every single day in the mission of updating the electronic medical records for the veterans through the 130 veteran clinics, such as Jesse Brown in Chicago, and then 1,500 of the affiliates, which is like the Adam Benjamin Center, which is in Maryville, ultimately making sure that they have the same system of electronic medical records that provide a quality healthcare, and for the providers and for the customer, the veterans. And it's also connected to the Department of Defense. So as active members are leaving the service, that those records, their medical records, will follow them to the VA. And so we are doing all that we can to utilize our skills and the leverage as the 1st Congressional District to make sure that we have a strong workforce, to make sure we have strong investments in education, and that we're protecting and advancing in the quality of life for our veterans who served our country.
Excellent. And that gives me a great segue into a question that has sort of been very difficult over this past year. But you are talking about education, you are talking about healthcare, you're talking about our veterans, and they have been very much affected by COVID-19 and by what has been happening around the country this past year. So how satisfied are you with how state of Indiana has handled COVID-19, and what do you see going forward? We have just crossed that threshold of President Biden's 100 days. We have heard his speech. What are your expectations? Because certainly it has been a very difficult year for educators, for our children, for veterans, and for the country as a whole.
So to answer the first question, am I satisfied? During a pandemic, all I want to do is contribute to the healing cause, and making sure that we get vaccinated, and making sure that every population has access to the vaccination. And you know what I am a part of, and when we passed the American Rescue Plan, is there was a national strategy to make sure that we got access for every adult and child in the United States to get vaccinated. And we're moving each day closer towards that goal. There's still vaccination resistance, and we have to really focus on vaccination acceptance. I have been vaccinated. I had the Pfizer, the 2 shots. I did not have a reaction after the second shot. So I encourage all to participate in the vaccination process so that we can get kids back to school safely, so that we can get our economy back on track, so that we can open up our restaurants, our churches, our hotels, to go back to having weddings and concerts and being able to gather and have that normalcy. So there is no satisfaction because it's a pandemic, but what I do have is a working knowledge of knowing that every day that we provide the resources necessary that allows people access to vaccinations, allows people economic stability to get back to work, and allows an opportunity for our economy to begin to thrive again, that's when we're moving in the right direction. And so it's not only in the state of Indiana or the region or the United States, it's a global effort. Sure. It's a global effort across the world. And I remember when I had the conversation with the ambassador, how important it was and how Serbia was moving in the direction of making sure that they minimized or mitigated the amount of viruses that were spread. And he was quite proud of the approach that they had taken. And going forward, we want to make sure that we are global partners in this. It's a global pandemic. And so ultimately, the resources of the United States and the whole world working together to find the solutions, to find the vaccine. Many countries are sharing vaccines, and companies worldwide in the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical companies are coming together, and science to be able to find solutions. So it is a priority of mine to make sure that we get through the pandemic, and every day we're getting closer towards that, based on working with the Biden administration and the members of Congress and the members of the United Senate who passed the American Rescue Plan.
Sure, and that is a great thing you bring up, because especially Serbia has been that regional leader. I don't know if you had followed that, but I'm sure the ambassador did tell you that Serbia was the first one who started getting the vaccines from all different manufacturers. So they were in fact sharing not just with the Balkan region, but with all of the Europeans. Serbia had that open policy: come visit Serbia and you can also get vaccinated for free. So yes, you are right. Serbia has been cooperating in that sense with every country, and we are pleased that you have taken notice of that as well. Now, just a sort of a question in terms of, you understand that many Serbs have been traditionally leaning Democrat in the area where you are, Chicagoland. We have been in this country since the 1800s, and you are one of the rare congressmen, and I'll be very, very honest with you, that is capable of reaching across the aisle, because many of them were also leaning Republican in terms of the presidency, but I will tell you, a lot of them voted for you, and that speaks volumes, I think, about your ability to reach across the aisle and have that relationship with the community. And I think that is wonderful. And that leads me to the question of the division in the country that we have seen lately. And do you believe that President Biden can unify the country? And what is the message that needs to be sent out? Because that polarization gap, in fact, there was poll that I was looking at yesterday, and the polarization gap seems to be pretty big right now, even compared to the previous President Trump's presidency. So what is that unifying message that you are clearly capable of spreading within your district? And is the Democrat Party, what is the direction that you see the Democrat Party going towards? If I am not mistaken, Pete Wisłowski, when he retired, he said something along the lines of retiring as a centrist. And you have a really great grasp on that unifying message. So what are your thoughts going further, where the party is? It doesn't seem like it's the JFK party anymore.
Well, what I would say there is, first, thank you. And I am proud to bring people together and to cross over the party lines in order to find solutions and to be able to bring people in together who believe in what we can accomplish as a member of Congress. So secondly, I was on the chamber floor when the insurrection happened, and there was fear and panic. But what I had identified, that there was a great deal of hate and a great deal of division, as you mentioned. And so as a member of Congress, what my priorities are to make sure that we focus on what brings our country together. I'm going to give a couple of examples. When I talked about broadband and the digital divide, so economically, educationally, health-wise, that is all infrastructure that is utilized by the internet, our communications. And so I have co-sponsored a piece of legislation and signed on to a letter with Congressman Pence, who is a Republican from Columbus, Indiana, in a bipartisan effort to make sure that Indiana has access, or we are in the working as hard as we can to close that digital divide and to lay the fiber across the state of Indiana, in places like Gary, in places like Lafayette, in places like Columbus, Indiana, that rural and urban areas can work together and members of Congress can work together to close that digital divide. I bring that up also. There is another member of Congress out of Indianapolis, or just east of Indianapolis, Victoria Spartz. And she wants to sit down and talk. Congressman Spartz wants to sit down and work on opportunity zones together. There's an opportunity zone that was designated by the previous administration in Indianapolis and in Gary on the port on Burns Harbor. But that is an opportunity for us to bring business and jobs, self-sustaining jobs, good paying jobs, and allow private industry to create opportunities for people to thrive and to provide for their families. And if we do that and we work together, we'll start chipping away at that divide. So when we talk about opportunity in the United States, we have to make sure that it's accessible for all. And we have to make sure that apprenticeship programs and trade programs and college opportunities are equal opportunities for all residents, all citizens to have a chance at earning a living. And if we can do that without everything else that goes on the fringes, as I'd like to say, I focus on what I can accomplish. I want to make sure that we're reinvesting in Northwest Indiana with the infrastructure bill, with roads, bridges, with our steel industry, with our manufacturing base. If we can do that and bring families together, that they have a good paying job and they don't feel left behind as we talk about new economies or renewable energies or solar or wind, if we're manufacturing those types of things and creating jobs and reskilling and retooling those employees, then we'll chip away at that divide. Now you're in the next level of that is there's also a great divide of hate and racism and sexism and ageism, all of those things. And so as a member of Congress, what I can do there is realize that that won't change overnight, but I can stand up to it and I can have difficult conversations that will help change the way that we operate going forward.
Wonderful. And that's actually a great segment that you are working on, especially because Serbia is attempting to be one of those leaders, especially in IT industry. So if there is an opportunity for that type of cooperation, I believe a lot of Serbian Americans who are here and then Serbs who in fact live in Serbia would love that opportunity to work on some of these common issues that would also help Indiana and Serbia. And one final question I have for you, we have been tracking, but this has been developing over several years. There has been an opioid crisis that's been affecting Indiana, Illinois, especially Midwest. I come from a background of transnational crimes. We are having a crisis currently at the border from everything that we understand from the media. So especially Indiana being affected by the opioid crisis and fentanyl being one of the things that has become an issue. What are your thoughts on the border security and how to tackle the opioid crisis that we have had for quite some time?
Two very important issues. First and foremost on the border issue. First and foremost, we want to have legalized immigration into our nation. And everyone wants to have a border and want to make sure that not only is it protected, but we still have the American dream to allow people into our nation. and to achieve the goals of, we're the beacon of democracy across the world. And the innovation and the American dream still exists. And so we have to have a balanced, measured approach towards immigration. As you mentioned, Congressman Visklowski retired as a centrist. That being said, we have to have an advocacy for what we believe in and find like-minded individuals that want to find solutions, but yet still allow for us to continue to be a country of immigrants who want to thrive and bring their culture here, but be able to have a slice of the American dream. And that being said, there are, so then transitioning to the opioid crisis. In my previous elected official job, part of getting at the core root of poverty very often was either mental health or addiction. And so we tackled addiction every single day and how difficult it was. And what we have to realize with the opioid crisis is it's all economic and social, crosses all socio and economic individuals, and its approach. No longer is it someone underneath a bridge who's a drug addict. It's a construction worker who hurts his knee, or it's a senior citizen who has back pain. They're highly addictive drugs that have a high impact of addiction. And that being said, or someone who has surgery. And so we have to work on it every day. I recall we had a program that had a Narcan training. A Narcan is a drug that will save your life if you overdose. And so it was here, we were just talking about before we opened up how cold it gets in Northwest Indiana. It was the polar vortex. It was about a year and a half ago, and it was 60 below. We had 150 people show up for Narcan training and resources for opiate addiction at Wicker Park. And it wasn't addicts who showed up. It was family members who were watching it unfold in front of them, who felt hopeless, who felt helpless, and that they had nowhere to turn. And Absolutely. So we really put resources towards making sure that they understood the resources that were available to them. So as a member of Congress in Lake and Porter County, my district, we only have approximately 53 overnight beds for rehabilitation. If we're going to tackle that, we have to open that up because people are waiting. We had to work with Chicago. We had to work with Elkhart. We had to work with Indianapolis. But throughout the state of Indiana, those beds were all full. And people who are facing addiction and family members who don't want to lose their loved ones based on the opioids have to have resources available or beds and services to help them get through those addiction and those times. So I kind of want to separate the two. Making sure we have legal immigration that still keeps the American treating people in a humane way. I also, as a North Township trustee, we were one of the first townships in the state of Indiana, a conservative state, to have an immigration attorney on staff to help with asylum, to help with people who were faced with violence and had the opportunity to come to our nation based on seeking our democracy and safety, a better life. And so we worked on cases through the faith-based community. We worked with Catholic Charities. We worked with other churches of people who were facing persecution based on being in their countries or being here. And we were able to assist people through that process. And it gave me great insight into the immigration process. One, it isn't cheap. Two, it takes a very long time to become a citizen. But three, the majority of Americans want open borders to treat people in a humane way, but to make sure that we're doing it in a legal manner. And if we continue down that path and find legislation that approaches that, we'll be very supportive of any measure or any piece of legislation that does just that. Excellent.
Anything else that I might have missed and that you wish to say to your Serbian-American constituents?
Consistently throughout my life, the Serbian community has welcomed me. And what I mean by that is just being very honest. I used to, when I had time, work out. And two of my workout partners were Dragan Mikovic, who was out of Illinois, and Mish Vajestica, who was out of Munster. But I bring up those names because I was able to go to the weddings where there would be 1,000 people at a wedding. And you would celebrate as a community And I will never forget that opportunity. And it is a well-knit, engaged community who holds their elected officials to a higher standard.
Yes.
And with that engagement. And I hope to continue to have that relationship. That's why I mentioned one of the first international phone calls that I had was with the Serbian ministry or the Serbian embassy, making sure that they knew as a member of Congress I had an open line of communication and wanted to build upon that relationship going forward. So that being said, I look forward to working with you and let this be a first opportunity to know that I am an advocate and want to learn more about the community and what we can do in the 117th Congress to work together. I also, in the near future, look to visit some Serbian-owned businesses within my district and to really expand upon the economic needs of the community and what we can do internationally to bring businesses here. And if we do that, then it is, that is really working in a synergy that can provide jobs, provide economic development, and provide a quality of life for individuals.
Agreed. And I am happy to now have this line of communication open. Serbian Radio Chicago is always open for you. We will welcome you anytime, and we are hoping to see you at some of those parties, weddings, celebrations, and we will help organize your trip to Serbia, which we hope it's going to come very soon. Again, thank you for being our guest, Serbian Radio Chicago, in partnership with Serbian-American Voters Alliance, Congressman Frank Mrvan, Indiana's 1st Congressional District. Thank you.
Again, happy Easter, and I appreciate and am grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much.